And I am back. Robert Reich, Labor Secretary in the Clinton administration, and about as famous a person, I think, as an observer of the human condition as you could possibly meet. Robert Reich points out the obvious that January 6th of this year will be remembered as one of the most shameful days in our history. And that was the date, of course, that the U.S. Capitol was attacked by thousands of Trump scum, some of whom were very vocal in their intent on killing members of Congress or even the vice president. I mean, absolute filth, the kind of filth that you know exists in this country, but you expect them to live somewhere out on the fringes, not be attacking the U.S. Capitol. By the fringes, I mean the fringes of the alcohol or drug addicted. I'm being judgmental, and there's a reason for it. And that's because the people who attacked this country by attacking the Capitol, I told you my feelings about it. They should be arrested and tried, and if convicted, in some instances, life without parole. Other instances, just take them into the forest and hang them. No, seriously. About 140 police officers were injured in that attack, and 5 people died as a result of January 6th. If that's not murder, then a charge of murder doesn't exist. Another reality is that the Republican Party doesn't exist anymore. Reich writes that it is close to becoming a cult whose central animating idea is that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. Mr. Reich, with all due respect, it is a cult, and the Republican Party does not exist anymore. There is no Republican Party. It is now the Fascist Christian Party, or the Christian Fascist Party. Take your choice. Now, I know a lot of commentators who are not of the dregs of the Christian religion are afraid to label it as such, especially if the writer is a Jew or a Muslim or, I don't know, an agnostic or an atheist. It's difficult for these writers to identify the Christian Fascist Party as being what has taken the place in this country of Christianity. But I don't hesitate to identify it. That's exactly what it is. So Reich says, even now, almost a year later, Americans remain confused and divided about the significance of what occurred. And this happens to me every once in a while. I'll be listening to somebody on MSNBC, usually in the car, and they'll say something. I'll think, my God, that's right. What happened in this country? Oh, my God. So Reich wants to offer 4 basic truths. First of all, Trump incited the attack on the Capitol. If you remember, for weeks before the attack, this orange bastard had been urging his supporters to come to Washington for what he was calling a Save America March, which meant a Save His Useless Ass March on January 6th. That's when Congress was to ceremonially count the electoral votes of Joe Biden's win. That whole electoral college thing, by the way, of course, should be just shit-canned. I mean, what's the point in it? But without any basis in fact or law, and that's according to 60 federal courts as well as the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security, they all concluded there's no evidence of any kind of fraud in the election. So with no basis in fact or law, the orange vomit repeatedly screeched and farted and wheezed that he had won the 2020 election and Biden had lost it. And then on December 19th last year, this scummy bastard tweeted, quote, "Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. We'll be wild." I mean, that's a 75-year-old man tweeting that? He sounds like a fucking teenager out of control with a rifle in his hands. And then last December 26th, quote, "See you in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Don't miss it. Information to follow." On December 30th, January 6th, see you in D.C., all caps. January 1st, the big protest rally in Washington, D.C. will take place at 11 a.m. January 6th. Locational details to follow. Stop the steal, end quote. This is all shit that this this retarded bastard, no offense to people who are mentally challenged. I'm using the term in a derogatory way because I'm applying it to the orange vomit. But this is the kind of writing that this son of a bitch would put on his Twitter feed. And at a rally just before the violence, you remember the orange vomit repeated over and over and over again the lies about how the election was stolen. He said, quote, "We will never give up. We will never concede. It will never happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore," end quote. Can you believe that? Well, what is stunning about it is not that this useless waste of DNA walking around the orange vomit would say it, but that people would believe it. He told the crowd that Republicans, as if he was one, are constantly fighting like a boxer with his hands tied behind his back. So then he said, quote, "We're going to have to fight much harder. We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." You know, this scummy, useless son of a bitch has never fought like hell for anything except his privilege, his exalted position, his using the courts to stymie justice. That's all he's ever fought for. Jesus, God. And then he told the crowd that different rules applied to them, this crowd that became the mob. Different rules applied to them. He said this, quote, "When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. So I hope Mike Pence has the courage to do what he has to do. And I hope he doesn't listen to the rhinos, Republicans in name only, and the stupid people that he's listening to." Trump calling someone stupid. Astonishing. And then he ordered the crowd to the Capitol as the count, this symbolic bullshit of the electoral count was about to begin. And the attack on the Capitol came immediately after. Okay, that is the first of four basic truths. Here's the second. The events of January 6th was the capstone to 2 months during which Trump tried in his Trumpian way to reverse the outcome of the election. And what's the system that Trump has used his entire life? Lies, deception, bullshit, the courts, anything that he could. Shortly after the election, Trump ordered to the White House Republican lawmakers from Pennsylvania and Michigan to, according to Robert Reich, to inquire about how they might alter the election results. He invited other politicians to join in his conspiracy against the United States. And this is why I think the whole lot of these bastards should be held accountable. And if that means convicted of treason, hang them. I'm serious. He even called, according to Reich, 2 local canvassing board officials in Wayne County, Michigan, the most populous county. That's Detroit, and one that overwhelmingly favored Biden. And then he called the Republican Secretary of State here in Georgia and demanded, and you've heard the tape, I'm sure, of Trump, this filthy bastard, talking to Brad Raffensperger, who is a Republican conservative. He's not a Christian fascist, in my opinion, because he hasn't completely swallowed the wrong pill. Which one is the wrong one? The blue pill, the red pill, the orange pill, whatever the hell pill it is. But he told Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes. That's according to the conversation. And he added, the orange vomit said, the people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated. End quote. In other words, there's nothing wrong with being a lying, cheating, treasonous son of a bitch like I am. He said that to Brad Raffensperger. Well, Raffensperger wouldn't go along with it. And that's when Trump suggested that Raffensperger would be criminally prosecuted if he didn't do what Trump told him to do. Threats, intimidation, blackmail, the scummy son of a bitch. He said, quote, "You know what they did, and you're not reporting it. You know, that's a criminal offense. And you know, you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Ryan, your lawyer. That's a big risk," end quote. Now, he's saying that to the Georgia Secretary of State, who is just mumbling about, well, I'm sorry, no, nothing bad happened here. But threatening, I mean, Jesus Christ, if I walk into a bank tomorrow and threaten to hold up the bank, if I walk in and say, listen, I have a bomb here in my briefcase, and if you don't give me all your money, I'm going to detonate it. And they push a button and the cops show up and they open the bag and there's no bomb, I'm still going to be charged with bank robbery. I'm still going to go to prison for 10 or 15 years, right? So Trump can threaten the Georgia Secretary of State that he will be prosecuted if he doesn't participate in Trump's treasonous goddamn scenario of overthrowing the election. And what happens to Trump so far? Nothing. Nothing. Then the Orange Vomit tried to press the acting U.S. Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General to declare the election fraudulent. And when the Deputy Attorney General, the acting Deputy Attorney General, or no, he was real Attorney General, I guess, when he said that the department had found no evidence of fraud and warned Trump that his office had no power to change the outcome of the election, Trump replied, quote, "Just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and to his Republican allies." And not a single one of these Republican swine, these filthy, treasonous pigs, have been held accountable. So Trump and his allies continued to harangue the Attorney General nearly every day until January 6th. Reich writes, Trump plotted with an assistant attorney general to oust the acting attorney general and pressure lawmakers in Georgia to overturn that state's election results. But Trump ultimately decided against it after top department leaders pledged to resign en masse. So the hope is that more of these filthy details about what this rotten son of a bitch did will come out after the House Select Committee on January 6th gathers more evidence and questions for witnesses. Number 3, Trump's attempted coup continues to this day, Reich writes, and this is something I don't think enough Americans are aware of. Trump still refuses to concede the election. And he still continues to squawk and fart and wheeze that it was stolen from him. And he sits at the top of a network of slimy loyalists and allies who've tried to overturn the election and more importantly, erode public confidence in our method of selecting our leaders by mounting these partisan so-called state audits, the forensic audits. If there ever was bullshit, there you are. And these escalating attacks on state election officials. And when asked recently, Reich writes, about the fraudulent claims and increasingly incendiary rhetoric, a Trump spokeswoman said that the former president, quote, supports any patriotic American who dedicates their time and effort to exposing the rigged 2020 presidential election, end quote. You know, I think about the people who are designated spokesmen or spokeswomen for this filthy, nasty son of a bitch Trump. And I just wonder, how do they do it? And then I have to conclude, well, the way they do it, Mike, is they are convinced they have completely given themselves over to this slimy bastard in the same way that the Nazi high command gave themselves over to Hitler. It's exactly the same thing, until eventually the famous, and there were more than one, I understand, attempt to assassinate Hitler by some of his top military staff. Maybe that is going to happen in this case. Who knows? But the ones who are making statements now, the designated spokesmen, spokeswomen, I can't help it. I just wonder, how do they do that? And the only conclusion I have is that they honestly believe Trump. And this orange scum recently announced that he's going to host a news conference at Mar-a-Lago on January 6th. In the announcement of this, and I just hope to God that CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and NBC don't touch this. I know, the Nazi websites and news outlets in this country will carry it, but I just hope to hell that the legitimate news sites don't carry it. If they do, that's going to speak volumes about where they are, right? So in the announcement about his January 6th press briefing, Trump said, quote, "Remember, the insurrection took place on November 3rd. It was the completely unarmed protest of the rigged election that took place on January 6th. Trump then referred to the, and by the way, when he says unarmed protests, horse shit. Of course they were armed. And Trump then referred to the House investigation, quote, "Why isn't the unselect committee of highly partisan political hacks investigating the cause of the January 6th protest, which was the rigged presidential election of 2020. Jesus Christ. I mean, his rhetoric fluctuates between childish gibberish like the unselect committee and Hitlerian attempts to overthrow a government. Political hacks. Why aren't they investigating the cause of the Reichstag fire? You know, that sort of thing. And then he went on to castigate the rhinos, the Republicans' name only, which include Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who are on the January 6th committee. And he said, quote, "In many ways, a rhino is worse than a radical left Democrat because you don't know where they're coming from and you have no idea how bad they really are for our country. The good news is there are fewer and fewer rhinos left as we elect strong patriots who love America." See, when I read that kind of rhetoric, I get this fight or flight response that I was mentioning earlier in tonight's podcast. Only with me, it's a fight response. And I get this feeling I would like to punch this son of a bitch right in the nose. I mean, just with all the force I can gather. Just pow! Right in the kisser. To the moon, Alice! Which was back when Jackie Gleason and the American public thought smacking your spouse was funny. But I get that feeling that because of the filth and the hate and the lies that spew out of this bastard's mouth, I would just love to just suck him one. I mean, for real. So number 4, all of this reveals a deep problem in America that has to be addressed. The first, of course, is Trump and his bums have to be held accountable, of course. And the hope is that the Select Committee report will be used by the Justice Department to criminally prosecute Trump and the slime around him. But, and Reich points this out, this is not going to solve the underlying problem. He writes, "A belligerent and narcissistic authoritarian has gained a powerful hold over a large portion of America. As many as 60% of Republican voters continue to believe his lies. Many remain intensely loyal. The Republican Party is close to becoming a cult whose central animating idea is that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump." See, there it is again. I just wish that Reich and other commentators who have wide audiences would stop referring to the Republican Party becoming something. It has gone through the chrysalis stage, and it's now this monstrous fascistic Christian organization. Now, of course, Trump has had an awful lot of help, too, hasn't he? Fox News hosts and Facebook groups have promoted and amplified this raving son of a bitch for their own purposes. And the Republicans in Congress and the various states have played along. So the challenge ahead, and this is something we are facing, is to fill this void that he's filling up with lies and paranoia and fascism. We have got to fill it with a democracy and an economy that works for everybody. And unless we understand and respond to that truth, we're going to not only miss the meaning of what happened on January 6th, but we are going to contribute to the end of this country. I mean, you know this as well as I do. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.